Okay, please.
Hi everyone, my name is Rasul Narimani. I am one of the directors of Saraya Iran. It's a non-profit organization which tries to help Iranians integrate in the Canadian culture. Tonight we are here to. I would like to acknowledge that I'm speaking to you from the unceded land of Squamish, Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. And as you know, the Canadian election is happening tomorrow, and lots of folks from the Iranian community has had questions about the Green Party. What are the ideas, and what is the promise of this party? So we decided to have this session. Here I have we have James Marshall. James, I know James maybe so it's been like four years now.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, and James actually is a musician and he's in tech industry. He's also very passionate about the politics, and he actually wrote a book about the Green Party, and his book is called what does green mean? I highly recommend it. Thank you, James, for being here with us. I also the other guest we have is Archie, a very nice man. I haven't had the chance to meet him in person, but Archie was born in Vancouver. His family is, as far as I know, is in fish industry. He studied law, and tonight we are going to learn what is the Archie's story and why he decided to join this the Green movement, and what is his future ideas. What are his future ideas for the future of Canada? Okay, yeah. I think we maybe I go around the table, and also we have Mr. Abbas Sedqi, the director of the Saraya Iran. He doesn't need any introduction, but I would like to go around the table and ask you guys to mention something about yourself and tell us why did you decide to join this movement? I start with James.
Okay. زبان فارسی کم بلدم چون که همسرم ایرانی است, but I don't know enough to properly present, so I'll have to go in English. I got politically active specifically because there was a promise made in 2015 by Justin Trudeau about electoral reform, which is basically trying to make our system more fair for everyone to participate and everyone have their voice heard. And I don't know if anyone remembers, but that promise was not kept. And that got me very involved with wanting to get into politics myself and try to make change, because it's kind of when I realized that some of the promises that politicians make to us, they don't keep. And I chose to get involved with the Green Party because they have always been very focused on trying to strengthen democracy and trying to have many people's voices heard, trying to work together to not have politics be, one person against another person and having only one person get what they want, but instead to work together and make this something where we, share and collaborate. And then I deeply care about a lot of the other things that the party talks about, one of the major ones being the climate crisis, and others being issues of affordability, and how we structure our society and how it's not delivering us a lot of the things that we've been promised. And as a young person, we've been told for many years that if we do this, then we will have success. And many of us feel that we have tried to do that, and the system has been built in a way that it's not working. And so Greens propose a lot of new ideas, and that for me is very exciting.
Thank you. How about you, Archie?
Well, I became involved in the Green Party quite some time ago, and somewhat like James, I was very disappointed about the promise by Justin Trudeau to bring in electoral reform, and when it died through, I think, lack of effort by Mr. Trudeau, I found that very disturbing. Mind you, as James points out, many politicians say one thing, but don't follow through with it after they're elected. Happens an awful lot. Now, I think there's, to be fair to politicians, there's probably sometimes good reason for it, but often the reasons are more to do with trying to stay in power than they are with being fair to the electorate. And this not following through on the electoral reform is one of the main reasons why I think there's so much conflict in the election, why there's a lot of people upset about what's going on in politics. If we had electoral reform, the way I would see it, everyone could vote with their conscience, and we would have a number of different parties in Parliament, and those parties would have to work together, because if they didn't, nothing would happen. But we all know that people that generally run for politics like to get things done. I think that's a fairly acceptable thing to say, but they don't always cooperate in doing that. But if we had electoral reform, we would have probably coalitions or minority governments more often, and people would work together to come to conclusions. Only through working together are we going to begin to be able to, I think, help society work better, because we'll have to get along, and the Parliament for the future with electoral reform would represent every possible group imaginable. For example, I'm just thinking off the top of my head, the Iranian community could possibly have somebody representing them in Parliament, because electoral reform may provide an opportunity for that to happen. Nothing wrong with that. And if that's what the Iranian community wanted, they may well have a representative in Parliament. It could take place in theory. The way it is, everything is broken down to people being persuaded to vote one way or another, as opposed to voting the way they feel their vote should be counted. So I have a background, as Rasul mentioned, in commercial fishing. I left that industry in my early 20s, went to university, ended up becoming a lawyer for the last 38 years. And I've been following environmental issues now for many decades. And that's together with electoral reform is why I'm running for the Green Party. I want to bring electoral reform in, and I want to ensure that environmental issues are at the forefront of the political agenda of Canada. Now, I can talk an awful lot, so I better stop there. Otherwise, I should let questioner or James talk for a while.
Yeah. So one of the things that I think might be interesting for people is the history of the Green Party. So James, can you elaborate on that? Why which countries actually, in which country this movement started?
Sure.
And I think it is important for people to appreciate that that Green Party is not is a global movement, and there was consequences of human activities on this planet, which brought this need for us to form this new party. So please, I start with James.
Yeah. So in Canada, we have several political parties. The Liberal Conservative parties are the oldest. They're, I think, about 150 years old. They trace themselves back to Britain. The NDP, the New Democrat Party, is about 80 years old at this point. And the Greens were formed in the 1980s. And it started kind of all over the world at the same time as people started to realize the depth of the climate crisis and what was happening. And they asked for their political parties in all these different countries to do something about it. And in many cases, these parties did not want to, because in a lot of the time they had been kind of captured by rich interests that didn't want to disrupt the way in which they were making a lot of money, and so they didn't want to act on this. So the Greens thought that, you know, probably the only way that they were going to get action was if they formed their own political party, if they went and, you know, tried to advocate for these things themselves. And I think Germany is probably the country where the Greens were most successful, and where a lot of the kind of mental work in building the philosophy was done. And in Germany back in the 80s, the Greens were a lot of young people, a lot of people who at the time opposed nuclear energy because they were very scared. That's another issue. A lot of people who wanted peace, who wanted a lot of the wars that were going on to stop, and a lot of people who wanted us to focus instead on trying to lead good, happy lives instead of just leading rich lives. And so that was formed in Germany, and a lot of other countries took their example and took a lot of the writing that they were doing. And yeah, in 1980 was the first time, 1983 was the first time when the Greens ran in Canada, and they've just been, I think, building since then.
Archie, what do you think about this movement? As a person who, I think you're, I consider you a person who's passionate about this movement, and how do we make, I guess, people aware of the necessity of this action? Does it make sense? My question, is that clear?
Are you suggesting, Rasool, that the Green Party is a necessary part of the political evolution of our country and our world? Is that?
That is my feeling, but I think, do you agree or?
Well, unfortunately, you're asking the wrong person, because I'm part of the Green Party, and I agree very strongly by my actions. You know, I think it's essential to keep in mind that, as James has pointed out, the climate crisis, as it was evolving, made the Green Party more and more relevant as time went along, and then other issues, if I can put it that way, also appear to be more and more relevant, such as the electoral reform, such as a greater equality amongst the people in society, and ensuring that there is not so much poverty, that there's housing for everybody, that there's, how would you say it, an opportunity for those who are less fortunate economically to have a good education by going to university without there being any tuition fees. For example, in Germany, places like Germany and Norway, there's no tuition fees for university. It's difficult sometimes to get into university, I understand, from speaking to German students, but once you're there, you don't pay any tuition fees. So if somebody that has the misfortune of coming from a family that doesn't have much in the way of income wants to go to university, the finances don't stop them. And now there are these huge student loans that many people have to accumulate when they go to university in this country. Now, to put it bluntly, the Green Party has a vast array of policies associated with both environment and social movement issues,
and economic,
benefit everybody.
So this is a very interesting subject, because so many times when you talk to people and tell them about the Green Party, they know the issue of the climate change. But the moment you talk about economic solutions, they feel like the Green Party, at least in British Columbia or Canada, this is my feeling, that people cannot trust the solutions that the Green Party suggests. But that's my personal experience with some of the community. What is your explanation? How do you describe this solution, like the Green Party solution to these people? And specifically, if I want to mention, is they say, oh, we are, for example, we have an oil-based economy. How do we replace oil with anything else? Mm-hmm. So that is the biggest question they ask. So how do you answer?
I have been pushing for a while to try to get the Greens to focus on an economic message, because I think this is something that we're seen as not having, and we do, but it's not what we focus on. And I think we should really explain this to people. I brought a random selection of books. This is one by a Canadian author named Peter Victor called Managing Without Growth, Slower by Design, Not Disaster. And this is a big book, well researched by multiple PhD authors. And a lot of the ideas that the Greens have are not crazy ideas out of nowhere. They're something that, like, a lot of economists have spent a lot of time working on. And, you know, in my opinion, they are very smart ideas, but they are different ideas than what we've been doing so far. And I think that does scare people because, you know, people see that for the past however many 100 years, society has not collapsed. So I guess our ideas are doing well enough. The Greens would argue that it's not good enough. And that we are rooting ourselves towards a collapse because the things that happen in our climate to our planet are in large part caused by the economics that we've decided to use. And we're not going to really be able to solve them by doing the exact same things that we've been doing all this time. So we need to look at the way we structure a lot of economic ideas and think that, you know, maybe there's some tweaks that can be made, maybe some things that we need to get rid of, some new things that we need to introduce. And I think that's something the Greens should focus on. And I could talk about this forever, but I don't know if Archie wants to weigh in as well.
So Archie, can you please tune your answer for people who are located in the North Shore, because there is you are going to you know, you have lots of knowledge about this area, and people have questions like what it means to be green when it comes to economy for your area.
Yes, thank you, Rasul. It's quite agree with James about how the Green Party must focus more on economics. Now, the book which I've been reading is recently is by this chap named Mark Carney. Now, you know, Mark Carney is often referred to as being a liberal, but frankly, I think his policies are more in tune with the Green Party. So his recent book from this year, Mark Carney Values. Now, he plays upon the word values in the sense that he quotes, perhaps for some of you in the Iranian community, a relatively obscure person, but he gets his title of his book from a fellow named Oscar Wilde, who is I guess you could say, a bit of a, how would you say it, a wit in England about 100 years ago. So Oscar Wilde had this to say. This is where Mark kind of gets the title of his book. Many people in our society know the price of everything, but the value of nothing. Now, when I say that, that's where he gets his book title, Values. The value of nothing. The economy is focused on everyone getting rich as quickly as possible. Now, I'd like to be rich. We probably all would be, but unfortunately, the world can't support that. It's absolutely impossible. Currently, the world has many rich countries and many poor countries, and this divide is either going to lead to wars, mass poverty and starvation, or a combination of the two. And we have to develop an economy based upon the values. And that's what Mark Carney's book is all about. We have to have values before knowing the price. So we have to value our atmosphere, value our fresh water, value other people, and work together, as opposed to being always competitive and trying to outdo each other. We have to cooperate. Now, this is a very major change in terms of how our society works, but it's essential. So in terms of Canada as a whole, we can go back to having electoral reform as an essential part of, I think, the kind of values that Mark Carney is talking about, the kind of values we should all talk about. Having an economy that allows us on the North Shore to have people to have housing that they can afford to live in. Now, the federal government doesn't control the housing situation on the North Shore or even the transit situation on the North Shore, but both transit and housing are very important features of our lives on the North Shore, given it's so congested at times in driving that we can spend much more time in driving than we want to. to get off the North Shore in the afternoon, as you probably noticed on the bridges, takes forever for the Second Narrows Bridge. Well, this could be controlled to some extent or helped to some extent by having what I would consider a reasonable development plan where the federal government assisted in setting up a tramway. It's kind of like a above ground subway from the foot of Lonsdale through to the foot of 15th Street in West Vancouver. And along that area, I have 6-story apartment blocks developed, of course, in a very positive and tasteful way, but nonetheless 6-story apartment blocks. These apartments will be built from lumber, which is of course produced in British Columbia. They're also much less expensive to work with than cement. And so the apartment blocks could be fairly cost effective. And in turn, if your income is such that you need to qualify for something like either cooperative housing, which I can explain if you wish me to, or something like a tax incentive for people that have difficulties with respect to renting by way of a tax deduction on your income tax return, or even outright grants from the government. This would allow some people who work on the North Shore but can't afford to live here to stop commuting and actually be able to live in the community, which would cut down the horrendous traffic problem. Once again, to some extent, I wouldn't say perfectly, we have on the bridges during rush hour. And it would also, I think, make for a better community all in all, because we would have many more younger people being able to afford to live here, and having a diversity of ages as well as a diversity of cultures is a positive thing. Perhaps that's enough. Hi, James.
Thank you.
Oh, I'll jump in with more stuff unless you want to move on.
So I would, definitely, this is a very broad subject, and we don't have much time to actually spend on it, but we could actually have a different session talking about economy, which I love that, maybe for future. But I would like to switch the gears to immigration. So James, can you give us a broad idea of different parties' kind of policies or towards immigration, like conservatives, liberals, and then NDP, and kind of compare it to Green? Can you do that? Maybe
I can try. I don't know if there's a huge amount of difference. The Green Party is generally very supportive of immigration, because the Greens believe that like a diverse multicultural society is a stronger one. The Greens do have interesting ideas about globalization versus focusing kind of economically on the local economy and on local, but that doesn't, I don't think, play into immigration. So I don't know if perhaps Archie has more I'd like to say, but the Liberals generally have supported immigration, NDP as well, Conservatives less so. But I think this is something that in terms of Canadian political parties, you get general agreement on, that we are a country that has a tremendous amount of immigrants. I'm descended from immigrants. I'm joining a family of immigrants. So yeah.
So actually, my question for Archie is more specific, and it's about immigration process for the Iranian community. Some people, I don't have the exact data, but some people have told me that their files, when it comes to immigration to Canada, it takes much longer compared to other nations. I don't know how accurate is this data, but let's assume that this is the case. Archie, how do you do you have any solutions for these kind of problems? Do you think this is discrimination, or you think this is normal because the Iranian government is making things harder? Because there are different aspects of this issue. So what is your point of view?
Well, I think that's a very good question, Rasul, and it may well relate to the lack of embassies for Canada in Tehran, and for lack of embassies for Iran to have an embassy in Ottawa. This lack of ambassadorial connectivity is probably what's taking place in terms of the lengthening of time for immigration process for Iranians. So the first thing to do is to assert as quickly as possible, I think, to have ambassadors exchange with Iran. I understand that the last time we had an embassy there, there was some concern about the safety of the people in the embassy. That would have to be satisfied, of course, before they could set up an embassy in Iran. I would sincerely hope that wouldn't be a question or concern of the Iranian government in setting up an embassy in Ottawa. I can't imagine it being the case, but there's a little tangent here which maybe you can help me with, and that's I've heard only through the media that there is some concern about the Iranian government reaching out to Iranians in Canada and applying pressure on them in various ways to not support certain movements in Iran. I don't know if that's the case, but I've heard of that. And that might be a reason why we don't have an embassy from Iran in Ottawa. But resolving those issues, obtaining certainty for the safety of the embassy staff in Tehran for the Canadian government, and assisting the Iranian government in being assured that they're going to be having free access to every level of ambassador action here in Canada will be the first step. And I would think that would go a long ways to opening up the immigration process for Iranians coming into Canada. Now, that probably is a necessary condition for, I think, moving forward on making it smoother. Now, with respect to immigration in general, James is quite correct. Canadian government's generally in favor of immigration by way of something like 1% of the Canadian population per year seems reasonable. That'd be around 380,000 people per year. And I think I should touch on another issue. As a lawyer, I've represented many people from Iran in all kinds of areas of legal problems. And one of the things I've noticed, I've represented people that are qualified as engineers in Iran or qualified as nurses in Iran. They can't make use of their skill set here. They have to go through substantial retraining. I think we have to work on recognizing the skill sets from other countries more quickly. Now, certainly there may be differences in how the skills are used or approached, but the very difficult pathway for many immigrants in trying to have their skills from their home country being recognized in this country is a real problem for many ways. In many ways, it's obviously a real problem for the immigrant person going from being maybe an engineer, having to now drive a cab in Canada. But it's a problem for our country in Canada because we don't have the benefit of their excellent education and their skills and desires to use that education in this country. So we need to make that a win-win for the immigrant and a win for this country by having that particular kind of barrier or skill set using this country become easier and streamlined. Perhaps about answered enough there, Russell, or do you want some more?
Pardon me?
Is that enough information?
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, so I have to make it clear actually for you guys. The Iranian community is very polarized when it comes to these issues. Like some people, some of the people in the community, they highly support the idea of opening the embassy and, for example, supporting the Iranians by providing like drugs or medical supplies to Iran for COVID situation. And some say some are against it. Some things that some people think that they are supporters of sanctions. And but you made it clear, Archie, that it makes sense to you to open the embassy and at least have some communication. And personally, I feel like that is necessary. For example, if my mom or my sister, they want to come to Iran, it's very inconvenient for them to get visa. So let's
from-
change it.
Can I quickly just jump in? Just from a personal standpoint, I'm not sure if Iranian community knows how difficult it is for Canadians to visit Iran as well, because I think it was a promise by Trudeau to reestablish some diplomatic relations that were cut off in 2012 under Stephen Harper. And I, just from a personal standpoint, would very much love to go to Iran because I'd love to accompany my partner, meet her family, tour the country. And it's exceptionally difficult for me to do that as well. So I would just love to see it if, some progress was made there.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning that. Yeah, that is a really good point. Now, I would like to actually change the subject to more international policies and Canada's role in Middle East specifically. We all observed what happened in Afghanistan, and big changes are happening now. You see the European countries are coming together. They're making their own, partnership. U.S., Australia, and as far as I know, another country, they are also signed, and England, I believe, they signed this other agreement. But I feel like, so the question is, what do you expect from Canada when it comes to these issues? How Canadians should be, how contribute to these issues, and which side should they take? Should we follow US? Should we follow Europe? This is and I do understand this is a very, very general question, but please make it short.
I can offer some interesting history here about the Greens, because the Greens have always been a pacifist party. It's a party that doesn't generally support military intervention. And I mentioned Germany earlier. Back in 2001, when the West started getting very involved in the Middle East in recent memory, the government of Germany was a combination of their Labour Party and their Green Party in coalition together. And the foreign minister of Germany was the leader of the Green Party at that time. So they went through a lot of difficult decisions about voting whether they would support, U.S. invasion in Iraq, U.S. intervention in Afghanistan, at the same time in Yugoslavia as well, in Kosovo. And the Greens put their foot down there. And the reason why Germany never went into went into Afghanistan alongside the Americans was because the German Green Party said, this is not a justified way to do militarily. The Greens generally believe in the authority of the United Nations to decide together this is something that the world needs to do. And I think they generally want the global community to come to an agreement before anything is done. They don't want to act unilaterally. They don't want to just go along with a country that decides to do something, even if that country is one of our allies.
Thank you. That was a really good answer, but I would like to hear from Archie as well.
Well, I think James has put it very clearly. The Greens are generally non-combatant in their approach to international affairs, and B, the United Nations is the preferred forum within which we would like to see international problems resolved. But currently, the United Nations, unfortunately, doesn't necessarily have the support of all countries the way it ought to have. And it does have the Security Council, which often gets hamstrung by veto votes. China or Russia having the veto does complicate things, but I suppose if you're Chinese or Russians, the United States or Great Britain having the veto causes complications. Hopefully the United Nations can have its structure amended at some time, but that would probably be something like trying to amend the Canadian Constitution, a very, very difficult task. Now, you asked about the Middle East and Canadian government's position in the Middle East. I'm not sure we can go with this, Rasul. There's so many different ways to deal with Iran and Afghanistan, Saudi Arabia, Israel, Lebanon, probably the most politically complicated part of the world, if I may say. And there currently are wars, or on the edge of wars, 2 or 3 different areas there right now. And poor Lebanon's collapsing for reasons I can only guess, but certainly it's collapsing as we speak, it looks like. And that's going to be perhaps another Syria if we don't watch out. It's almost impossible to solve. People that have best of intentions may never solve it. I have to be realistic about this. You know, with Russia supporting Sadat in Syria, and the Turkish government coming into Syria, they're not welcome, but they're there. And then Lebanon having all those refugees, and then of course the unfortunate problem of Israel and the Palestinians, where the Palestinians are being, from what I can see, oppressed by the Israeli government when they want to build housing on the Palestinian lands. Where do you start with solving all that?
There's one other interesting aspect, which is that the current leader of the Green Party of Canada, a woman named Annamie Paul, is a international rights lawyer. So we certainly have expertise in the party on this file. I don't think it's Mayor Archie's particular area of expertise, but there are many people involved in the Greens that, you know, have quite a lot of work experience in, in international relations.
Thank you. We are almost done. So Devyani is going to join us in 5 minutes, but let's see if there is any questions, if anyone wants to ask any questions, and in these 5 minutes. And yeah, let's see. Taha?
Yes, please.
Yes.
Hello, thank you so much, James and Archie. Am I saying it correctly? Thank you so much for joining us and providing this opportunity. So I just had a question regarding, this has been actually kind of on my mind for 2-3 days. It's kind of a burning question for me right now, that the electoral reform, it has been kind of many years that these kind of relatively minority progressive parties has been like just saying, I mean, it has been I think it has been something that even Liberal Party has been talking about for like 70, 80 years. I've heard.
They first promised it in 1913.
Yeah, exactly. I heard that. I was like, wow, this is actually. So isn't it finally the time, considering all the urgency, because this is not, I think, only a matter of, look, let's have a better political system right now. It's a matter of just leaving our country in the hands of liberals and conservatives forever, I think. Shouldn't there be finally, and also adding to that, another layer of, right now, Maxime Bernier's party, I'm hearing like new trends among progressive people who are thinking, maybe even like PR is not that much of a good idea. We don't want like 3 like proto-fascists like people inside our parliament who get like more kind of get a platform or get a kind of more traction there or something like things like that. So isn't it the time that like NDP and Green supporters and parties push for an alliance among progressives who is, I think right now, like NDP has at least 20% vote. Green has like, I don't know, something around. Isn't there like, isn't an alliance actually possible? It's not, and it's not even like talked about that much. I mean, people are, it's like keep going like PR, but as far as we can see, this is not gonna happen this way.
So this is on the topic of, something like the PPC getting representation in Parliament. I can tell you that the people that make up some of these political movements that we don't agree with, they're already in Parliament. They're just inside other parties. They've always been there. They just join the Conservative or whatever else. And, having a system in which everyone's voice is respected, it wouldn't give a voice to people, to like people who we may not disagree with, it would just put them somewhere where we can see them. You know, we'd be able to say that is the party that I do not agree with them, instead of them perhaps hiding inside another party. So that's an argument that I know people make. I don't think it's a good one. In terms of an alliance between parties, it does get talked about a lot, because some of the positions that the Greens and the NDP hold are the same, and the Greens hold positions the same as, you know, there's every party that we can find places we can agree with. I think you can say here in BC, though, where we all live, that we had a Green and NDP working agreement. We had a referendum on electoral reform that I would strongly argue that the NDP did not want to see happen, and that they made sure it was unsuccessful. And then we have an NDP government here in BC that is continuing to build liquefied natural gas fracking in the north, that is continuing to do logging of Fairy Creek. And so the Greens have a very difficult time working alongside the NDP, because whenever we've tried to in the past, the NDP has taken advantage, I believe, of that relationship and used it to try to, you know, we had an unnecessary early election last year in BC that was called by the NDP a week after the new Green leader was elected, to try to basically break down the Green vote. And so although we would love to work with other parties, I think the Greens generally are in favor of that. We have been bitten quite a few times when we have attempted to work with the NDP. And so if people who are making that argument that there should be, you know, working together, I would say please make it to them, because they're the ones that I think are not in the past have not respected that possibility.
Of course, but what I'm saying is that has the Green Party tried to put something out that like looks and seems very feasible, so that it can get, like, don't we need a campaign for that? I mean, we have seen many campaigns for like, I've seen this Green Left thing that I think Dimitri has started or something. I'm not sure about that, but don't we need some kind of like outside of the party's movement?
Some of them
something
exist.
that puts out something that, and when I'm saying like alliance, I think I have something very much different from something that, okay, we went into this election and they are now a minority, they need you, so we have a working. Yes, but we need something else. I mean, we need Greens to actually promise NDP that they can actually get 3 more seats with running with them in these like specific. I mean, we need a proposal that is like, that sounds very feasible and sounds very like helping NDP and Greens at the same time. Or things. I mean, I'm not a Canadian politician. Yeah. I'm pretty new in Canadian politics, but I see that there is potential. But maybe because I'm an outsider, I haven't seen the effort to actually make that happen, or actually at least make that demand, or make that something, voice it out, so that like people like me are like, oh yes, if this is what.
You may recall, sorry to cut you off, you may recall the English debate where Annamie Paul pointed out that she reached out to all the political leaders, including the NDP, and they didn't respond. So the Greens do reach out, and she was reaching out just as before her, Elizabeth May has reached out, and they didn't respond. So you're quite right. It's appropriate to look towards working together and be collaborative, whether it's all parties or just the NDP and the Greens. But as James pointed out, we had a form of coalition between the Greens and the NDP in this province, and Mr. Horgan basically he wanted power, and he went for it. And I would bet that the reason the other parties don't want to work with the Green Party leader Annamie Paul when she reached out is because they didn't want to be seen as sharing their power with somebody else. They wanted to hold on to it all for themselves, which is consistent with the Liberal, NDP, and Conservative approach to dealing with politics. It's not consistent with the Green way of approaching politics. So it's a bit of a dilemma. It's a matter of attitude and openness. And the attitude isn't there in the other parties from what we can see. And they certainly aren't open to it, as very clearly pointed out by Annamie Paul during the course of that debate.
Thank you. Actually, Devyani is here. Hi, Devyani.
Hi, how are you doing?
Good, thanks. Devyani is another Green candidate for this election, I believe in Vancouver Quadra. I got to know her last year for the election, is that right? And
Yeah,
I
it
was
was.
impressed by how much passionate she is about changing the politics in Canada, and also by her education. So tell us about yourself. Why did you decide to become active in politics, and what is your story?
Yeah, thanks, Rachel. And I'm sorry about the voice on the thing. I just put away my other headphones and I couldn't find them, which actually has a mic. So hopefully everybody can hear me all right, even
It's
with a bit of
okay.
echo. Okay. So I'm a climate scientist, and I've been working on climate policy for I think greater part of the decade, and I've been reaching out to all parties. I reached out to NDP, well, not all, not conservatives. I reached out to NDP, liberals, and the Greens as a scientist, and I was like, hey, I work on these issues. I work on energy transition. I'm basically looking at how to transition from a fossil fuel economy to a green economy, and nobody cared except the Greens. And so I was like, well, the Greens definitely seem to care about evidence and science. And they've even before I decided to run, both the BC Greens and the federal Greens had reached out to me for my expertise. So fast forward a few years, I still see there's no government action. We've seen that, Trudeau and everyone, they literally say, oh, we'll nationally declare a climate emergency, and then the next day they buy a pipeline. And so just this hypocrisy and lip service from politicians, from governments not taking the climate emergency as seriously. And frankly, as a climate scientist, I've been terrified about our future. And so when the snap elections were called in October last, the provincial ones, I was like, I just can't sit back anymore, because if the politicians don't listen to science, then let me take the science to them. So which is why I decided to run, and I decided to run with the Greens because they are the only ones that seem to care about science. But beyond that too, given I am an immigrant, a renter, a student, a woman of color, the Greens are truly the ones that have the best social justice and climate justice platform. And it's a movement, it's a grassroots movement. I have felt welcome, and that's kind of why I decided to run with the Green Party. So hopefully that's short and sweet.
Thank you. One of the questions that actually you mentioned about this transition from fossil-based economy to green economy. For some people, the roadmap is not clear. Mm-hmm. So do we have any proof on this planet that other countries have actually done it? Like how many countries have achieved that? Or is it how feasible are the plans?
Yeah, I don't think anyone's achieved a full transition yet. But when we look at a lot of the European Union countries, they are really on track. They have really made some serious commitments. They are totally changing their systems of energy, where it comes from. And what some of those reasons is those countries do seem to look after their people a lot better than we do in Canada. When it comes to social issues, when it comes to actually having truly universal healthcare, things like that. So when we talk about the transition, it is easier than, let's say, somebody like our country, where we are really run by corporations and profit, and we've been leaving the middle and the low-income people way behind. It's a little harder, but at the same time, will it be easy, this transition? No, but it is important, because if we don't start our transition now, this energy transition is going to get imposed on Canada. Now, what happened when Biden won the election? One of the first few things was to cancel the pipeline. And Canada is all up in arms. We've seen that TMX got all private investment pulled out. Private investment from the oil sands is pulling out. Insurers are dropping off TMX. It's because Canadian oil is the most environmentally and economically expensive oil. So is it going to be easy? No. But the sooner we make a plan, the sooner we pass a just transition plan, the sooner we plan on a managed wind down over the next 10 years, the fewer people will get left behind. Now, the Greens I've seen, and I'm also the Green Recovery Critic for the Green Party, and I helped write that platform about how to ensure this transition. But when you look at all the other parties, they are willing to let a lot of people die and a lot of people get left behind while we do this transition. So the choice is, are you willing to let people of color, marginalized, indigenous people, and the poor and the elderly pay the price, or are you not? I think that's what the difference is. And we do have ideas on how to make this happen. We will need massive government intervention in terms of federal funding, in terms of working with provincial governments, municipal governments, because it's not going to be a one size fits all. What happens in the oil sands will be very different than what's happening in the LNG parts of BC, right? So we really have to work at all levels, and we need to get beyond, this whole who's going to fund my next election campaign, and I just want to be reelected in 4 years. We have to think long term.
So actually, I would like to let you guys know that we are having another meeting after this at 7 o'clock. That unfortunately I can't invite you because that event is in Farsi. But we have invited expert in economists to come and compare the different platforms of different parties.
I have a point on that, as you say, about the platform on economics. Be careful when economists talk about party platforms, because they're basing it on economic theories that are inherently based on assumptions that do not reflect the real world. And so when you look at that, those economic models aren't really, like we talk about a perfect competition. It does not exist in reality, right? The other thing is they're talking about economics in terms of GDP, which is infinite growth on a finite planet. That is impossible, right? So when they're talking about that, they're not looking at human welfare. They're not looking at human well-being. They are not looking at the towns that are getting burnt like Lytton. They are not looking at the island nations that are going underwater. They are not looking at the seniors who are dying in heat domes. That is not because that is no money attached to it. They don't include it. So when they say this is economically the best model, it does not mean it's the best model for people and planet, because a lot of people are going to die. So be very careful when you speak to economists. I'm an economist, but I take care of these externalities. But any of the models these guys are talking about, ask them, have they truly factored in the cost of climate inaction, which by 2100 will cost trillions of dollars globally, which is more than the money that physically exists on planet Earth today. That is going to be the cost of climate inaction. And that's just in economic terms. Don't forget the billions of people who are going to die. What's the value to a human life? Ask them if they factor that in, then talk to me about which plan is the best economically.
Yeah, definitely. You actually clearly mentioned draw the picture. And sometimes I feel like we have to redefine the economy.
We have to go beyond GDP.
Yeah, the GDP is not a good metric. So having said that, I think we don't have much time. I guess it's just almost time to say goodbye. Devyani, Archie, James, if you have 1 minute to say something, and we can say goodbye. So I start with Archie.
Yes, just as I was saying earlier on, we have to have a values-based economy, and I think that's what Dr. Singh is talking about. Forget the counting of the nickels and dimes. We have to look at the values. The values include welfare for everybody. That is, we're all being taken care of. An environment that we can live in comfortably as possible, given all the pollution we put in the atmosphere all these hundreds of years. And so we have to work together to solve the climate crisis. And that isn't going to be something a standardly trained economist can possibly do without changing their mindsets quite substantially. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Devyani?
Oh, I have another minute. No, I think I said what I wanted to, but yes, I think we have to really move beyond partisan politics. We have to, the problem in Parliament right now is the Conservatives will vote down something because the Liberals said it, the NDP will vote down something because Liberals said it, Liberals will vote down something because NDP or the Cons said it. That is not helping anyone. First of all, we should have pro-rep, but in the absence of that, once elected, we should be working for everybody in our constituencies. We should be working for planet. I don't know how to do that. We need to remove lobbyists and profits and corporations from politics, because the point of government is for the people, of the people, not for the corporations and of the corporations. But that's what it is right now. And so we need to elect people in office who truly care about planet and people. And, we need to get rid of corporations the way they exist right now.
Thank you so much. James?
There's a quote that's often attributed to Einstein, which just says that if you continue to do the same thing over and over and expect a different result, then that's the definition of insanity. And I think that's the point that the Greens keep trying to make, which is that we can't expect the liberals or the conservatives to solve a problem that they created. It's ridiculous to think that they can change so much that they would fix a problem that they were responsible for. And so I just say to people to, vote for what you believe in, to not be scared about, vote splitting or anything like that. And to, if you would like things to be different or to change or to get better, then say with your vote that that's what you want to have happen.
Thank you so much. On behalf of Saraya Iran, I would like to thank you. I know you guys are having a very busy time, but it was a very informative session, and I wish you best luck in the election. Thank you.
Thanks, Rasul. And just to go by what James said, I say vote for hope. Don't stop voting out of fear, because that's what people have been doing. And where has that got us?
Excellent. Thank you.
The future. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Thanks,
Bye.
Rasul.
Thank
Thank you, Rasul.